Welcome to the BYC, brought to you live from the Export Beer Garden Studios, where we find ourselves in sadly familiar territory as we ponder the Black Caps' inability to deliver the hammer blow to a squirming and weakened opposition. The jubilation we felt as we became the World Test champions seems an age ago. Instead, we are back to the bad old days of emptying our bowels and getting a severe case of the wobbles as we collapse metres from the finish line. Expectations are a dangerous thing, particularly when this side has delivered so much to be celebrated. Yet here we find ourselves again, hungover, devastated, and having to endure the tedious warblings of a distinctly below-average Aussie commentary team. It's almost too much to bear. But before we hoe in, lads, this should get us into the mood.
Who the fuck just hit my car?
Hey mate, I'm parked there. It's a cricket ground.
I fucking live here! You gonna fucking pay for the damage?
Yeah, well, there we go, eh? We can relate, can't we, fellas?
The sounds of summer. That's every much the sound of summer as lawn's been mowed. And
Yeah, totally, man. I can't tell you on that front, actually, Paul Ford, how much I had to shout out to cars I'd destroyed on the boundary with my lofty six-hitting, mate.
Oh, I was going to say, were you batting or bowling? Yeah, I know. Look, I think we can all relate. I've been pounded for a number of sixes. This was Preston White was smashing this one, and it was Joshua Fraser bowled a full toss, and we're at the Ken Mackay Oval, and it is Queensland Kookaburra one-day competition Sunday afternoon. He hit it beautifully, to be fair. And I'll tell you what, when the guy yelled out to him the abuse from about like, who hit my car and all that, he didn't give two shits. He just walked down to the batsman at the other end and swaggered down and turned around and started facing up to the next ball. God, I love it.
Beautiful. All right, guys, it has to be done. We have to look at the debacle. That was a 3-zip loss to the Aussies. And Dylan Cleaver, massively disappointing.
Yeah, I think we're all wondering just where this team is at the moment.
Yeah.
And we're not quite sure. Is it time for a rebuild? I've had that in my ear a bit from people recently, but I kind of wonder, where's the Cavalry?
Yes.
What sort of rebuild can New Zealand cricket realistically undergo at the moment? Those were our best players over there. It's not like there's this massive youth movement coming through in domestic cricket that we can pick and choose the best. The best is already probably over there, Finn Allen. And I guess questions have to be asked whether Finn's now usurped Martin Guptill as the first choice ODI opener. But yeah, it was, as you say, massively disappointing. The batting stunk to the point where I gave up on that second ODI. I couldn't watch it through to the end and euphemistically dipped in and out of the third dead rubber.
Yeah. Well, Dylan makes a really interesting point, and it's a point we've been discussing, Paul Ford, on the BYC in terms of where is this team at the moment. And I think, Dylan, you're bang on the money. The issue that I have is, yes, we need to start making some changes, but I have the same thought process going on. Where are they? And who's it going to be? I mean, horribly reminiscent, this one-day series, Paul Ford, of what sort of happened to us in that English Test series, getting into strong positions and just dropping our bundle.
Yeah, that's the thing, there are a few comments around saying, New Zealand could have won that. We could have won that series 3-0. It's like, that's exactly what we said against England in the Test matches. We could have beaten Bangladesh 2-0 in the Test series at home. We didn't. We could have beaten South Africa 2-0 in the Test series at home. We didn't. The fact is, we're just getting ourselves into positions where we put other teams under pressure, but we're not able to exercise we're lacking the ruthlessness to complete the job. And I think this team for a number of years has been extraordinary at doing that. In fact, winning from really difficult positions and just being able to get the wickets on the last day or the runs or whatever it was. And it seems like that killer instinct, that kind of ability, whether it's a mental thing, we're just not able to get over the line. And I think, it doesn't, as Dylan says, I don't think we've got the wrong players there necessarily, but maybe what is happening is that we're just reverting to the normal. This is what being a New Zealand cricket fan is like for most of your life. We don't win games as often as we have over the last few years. It's just been this purple patch. And when I think in that second ODI, I saw a stat which said our youngest player was Tom Latham, who's 30. There's almost like a missing generation that we need to find them bloody quick.
Yeah, well, I sort of was trying to liken that in my intro, Dylan. You know, I can't remember the name of the great, was it the Commonwealth Games, the walker there. We're getting off and we're getting ahead. We're all over the opposition. And just as we get close to the finish line, we just seem to get the wobbles.
Craig Barrett.
Yeah, Craig Barrett. You know what I mean? And we just seem incapable at the moment of putting that final nail in the coffin. I mean, what is that? Because for me, it must be a mental issue, you know, that we're letting the foot off the neck and we can't seem to finish off matches.
Yeah, well, I thought the bowling was very good in Australia, but perhaps when you phrase it like that, perhaps once we got past the Bolt-Henry opening partnership, perhaps it wasn't as good as I remember. I know it's not long ago.
Yeah.
But they had them in all sorts of problems. Kane Williamson was criticised in the first match for not continuing with them. And then the pressure wasn't as great when the Fergusons and the Santners and that came on, and perhaps he should have stuck with them longer. He did that in the second match, and then towards the end of that innings, we couldn't apply pressure to Australia tail. That was a really frustrating one, 130 for 8 and ending up close to 200.
Yeah.
And then following that with the dismal 82. So, yeah, perhaps we're paying the penalty now for over-relying on Kane in the past, and his batting was just was painstaking in this series, like 48 strike rate, and he was still New Zealand's top scorer, believe it or not, even though he had a poor series. And perhaps we've relied too much on him and too much on Trent Boult, and we're now starting to see there's not a great deal beneath them.
Yeah, well, this just is part of the conundrum for me, Paul Ford. We're talking about where is the side at, and I've asked the question a couple of times in the last few weeks, where's Kane Williamson at? Where is he?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like that. I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but you've got to think that elbow injury is causing basically a permanent deterioration. I mean, his form since that T20 World Cup final has been poor in basically all formats for every team that he's played for, including the IPL, as we talked about on here. And the thing is, I had a quick look, like that 2019 Cricket World Cup, the 50-over edition, he scored about 30-35% of our runs in that tournament. So that means that he's got to score 30 to 40% of whatever total we're chasing. He also he's never scored at close to 100 really. He scores at about 80 or 90. But it just shows how dismal he's been when he's, scoring 89 off 185 balls in that series. And yeah, he looks a shadow of his former self. And I think you're right, Dylan. We've massively relied on him, and then had the grunt. Even Taylor, I think we miss actually.
Yes.
And I know we've got Conway there, but Taylor was a real banker for New Zealand, and I think we're definitely missing him. The thing is, in this most recent series, we had 0 50s. I mean, it's very difficult to win games of cricket without at least one partnership per innings. And it's felt like we've been doing the digging in, but then we've been getting out, and that's, I don't know. It seems unusual. It's a weird thing.
And I guess the problem is that we still build that batting lineup around Kane.
Yes,
even though he's not in form.
Well, it sort of occurred to me while you were talking there, Paul. Maybe it's as simple as that: is that our kingpin, around which all our batting is kind of rotated, is just not performing at the moment. And for God's sake, I mean, we can't put it all on Kane, but he really is struggling. And you were making the point before the podcast, Dylan, and I think it's a really good one. It's no good, we often see a player start off very slowly and slowly build the innings and then have a bit of a slap fest at the end of it to sort of get that run rate up again. But it puts massive pressure on your middle and lower order if you're soaking up all the overs and then you get out without the slap and dash.
Yeah. And look, it's become more and more Kane's method. He actually he's quite a quick scorer. Paul gave his strike rate before. I mean, that's not bad in the context of one-day cricket. But he seems to, I think, in fact, their whole team have because they had success at the 2019 Cricket World Cup, and part of that success, I think, was they identified conditions and they batted towards the target, and they did that very well, perfectly in the semi-final against India, and just a tiny little bit short against England. And I think maybe they've locked themselves too much into that. They want to be these reading the conditions savants and bat to a certain target and have that in mind, whereas really I think that at this point in their development, they should just be batting more freely.
Well, yeah, and Dylan mentioned Finn Allen, of course, of whom you're a big fan, Paul. Look, I've been on the record to say that I don't think he's there yet. I think he's certainly developing, and he's showing definitely some more promise, and I'm slightly more convinced about him. But on the other hand, I'm not entirely convinced about Guppy anymore, because there's another one of our sort of, kingpin players that's not really firing, and Dylan made the point maybe it is time for the transition. Yeah, well, 6-2 against Australia in, I guess, a pivotal series is not ideal, and it wasn't like he was unlucky the way he got out. There was one good catch, but one horrendous shot in that second game, swinging wildly at a wild one. And the thing is, we can put Finn Allen in, and he will do that. He'll take those risks. So if Guppy's massively out of form, then I don't think we've got a heck of a lot to lose. And frankly, I think we need to bring a couple of these young guys through and give them exposure against good teams in tough conditions. I think that there's maybe I've heard a lot of talk about this sort of mental barrier against Australia and all that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not convinced about that. Like, I think we've beaten Australia enough times overall to not be sort of overawed. But we're definitely a couple of cogs below our best. The other thing I was just going to throw in, sorry, before we move away, is I think that we massively missed Colin de Gromholm in that bowling in that bowling role. His one-day record is phenomenal, and we obviously don't have him to call on, and I think we're struggling to fill those overs. Yeah, James Neesham's bowling too many overs, and he is never going to be an economy rate guy. Yeah. Yeah, well, he does have a knack of getting wickets, but I know what you're saying about Jimmy Neesham. But yeah, it's one of those weird ones, because it's like the classic game of two halves, where one facet of our game seems to be functioning quite well, and the other facet is just falling apart. And you've got to have both to be functioning to win matches. And we've got here in the notes, is it time for a new skipper? Frankly, I mean, my opinion on that is it's not going to right the ship either way. No, because the captain-elect, if Kane stands down, I'm not 100% certain he should be a lock to play every game at Latham, the moment. You're talking about? Yeah, Tom Latham. I mean, he continued just a dreadful record against Australia, and he's a good player. Okay, I'm not at the point of dropping him yet, but I wouldn't want to bring in a new skipper that in 6 months or so you might be saying to think, actually, there'll be more dynamic young keeper batsmen around the country than this guy. Well, I think I definitely think we're getting to the point where we need to start making some selectorial risks, Paul Ford. Can I put it that way? Where we need to start blooding. I mean, and you think about that bloody tour we just did in the UK, would have been a perfect opportunity for younger players coming through to give them a bit of a dash. But we need to change things up a bit, because it feels like we're on a bit of a downward slide. Yeah, look, there was one in particular that I was frustrated about. It was in that third game where we've got Ben Sears. Yes, he's from Wellington. Yep, I'd quite like him to be picked and given a go in general. But I thought in a dead rubber, picking Lockie Ferguson over Ben Sears, I thought that was a good example of where we could give a young guy a crack. What have we got to lose? I tell you what, he wouldn't have bowled worse, and he definitely wouldn't have batted worse. Lockie Ferguson's innings in that match was I heard Darren Berry on one of the commentary things. He said it's the worst innings he's ever seen in international cricket, which is quite saying something, 9 play and miss, I think it was, in a row. Is that correct? Something like that. Now, speaking of filthy with the result, Peter H. writes, fellas, 6 losses in Test since the World Test Championship triumph. The only white ball wins comes against relatively anemic opposition. Winning position squandered. The 3 tests against the Poms, the 2 one-dayers against the Aussies. It's all karma for NZC's unbelievably shabby treatment of Ajaz Patel. Only the 3rd man to achieve the 10-wicket feat in an innings in Test history. The first away from home. 14 wickets in the match. 2nd best match figures ever for a New Zealand players. 2 overs bowled in Test cricket since his 14-wicket feat. 2 overs! Ridiculous. It's payback time for NZC. That's the karma. They've brought it on themselves and cursed the team. Perhaps good karma could be restored of Stead, Larson, Captain Kane, who I think is terrific apart from his reluctance to select then use Ajaz effectively in Tests in New Zealand, and the suits and ties at NZC should supplicate themselves before New Zealand cricket supporters and fans and publicly acknowledge their deplorable treatment of a fine cricketer. And I reckon you fellas at BYC should have banged on about it far more than you have as well. So there, discuss!
I actually thought we did.
Great email.
Yeah, it's a cracking letter. I thought we did bang on about it.
Yeah, we did actually.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I don't know about karma and the way the world moves in those sort of mysterious ways, but certainly their form has fallen off a cliff since they treated Ajaz so shabbily. And I agree, like the non-selection, not even in the squad, was dumb. Okay?
Yeah.
Dumb.
Paul Ford, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And I had a quick look at some stats. Ajaz's Test record: 43 wickets at 28. Sanders 41 at 46. Michael Bracewell, a bit unfair, I guess, but 5 at 57. I mean, these are the guys that we're thinking are being potentially, in the mix ahead of him. I guess, but I think that there's another good comparison, and it's Jack Leach, right? So Jack Leach is being picked by England. He's a journeyman spinner. He's never going to get 10 wickets in an innings. I will eat anything that you put in front of me if that ever happens. And they pick him day in, day out. And Jack Leach has got 95 wickets at an average of 32.6 and a strike rate of 68. Ajaz Patel has 43 wickets at an average of 28 at a strike rate of 58. So, I think we have a case in point here where why are England treating spinners better than us? And I feel sorry for the guy, and I think I think he should have been selected a hell of a lot more than he has been. Incredibly frustrating. And I also think what I don't quite understand is he's obviously not hard work to be around. He's a beloved character. Yeah. He's not a dick. He's not breaching the dickhead rule or even coming close to the threshold there. Seems like he's a wonderful chap to have around. So, yeah, it's biggest belief, really.
What is that threshold? I think this is a discussion point for a later podcast. Well,
you mean what breaks the dickhead threshold?
Yeah. So how far, what sort of acts do you do to go right up to the line but not cross it?
Oh, you just got to look at your Labuschagnes, your Warnes,
but they're crossing
your Steves.
They're crossing the line.
Yeah, true. Oh, well, interesting thought to ponder. Waiting! And I'm not going to bring up the fact, that Dylan and I felt we were on the slide, and after that first one day, and Paul Ford was all cock-a-hoop about our chances, and we're better than that. And I'm not going to blame Paul Ford for the travesty that followed. But just on that, let's look at the English-South African scenario, Dylan Cleaver, where you and I both predicted that the English would smash the South Africans. Paul Ford, on the other hand, on the opposite side of the camp, saying that the South Africans would do the same to the English. Your thoughts, Dylan?
Well, how did it go? I missed it.
Smashed them, Dylan. England smashed them, as predicted by Hoyte and Cleaver.
10 wickets, was it?
Yeah, nine wickets.
You guys are breaking up, but
your thoughts?
Look, I thought South Africa were a bit unlucky. No, it was really frustrating. I mean, that I defer to your greater cricket knowledge on this one. I was hopeful, but I tell you what, Ollie Robinson was extraordinary, and that. The English bowlers, I mean, Anderson and Broad, how good are they? They're still incredible. Yeah. Incredible bowlers.
And I tell you who else was bloody impressive in that test match. The other bowler, just gone out of my head. He's had a pretty good summer. Ollie Robinson. Yeah, he's done pretty well for himself too.
He's looking lithe. Well, I mean, Anderson and Broad have got 56 wickets over the summer. Anderson's got 27 at 18 in the 6 tests that he's played. I mean, quite unbelievable given that they weren't selected to go to the West Indies. McCullum has... Well, is it McCullum? Is it Stokes? Is it both of them? They're like father and son, aren't they? But England have gone from winning 1 out of 17 to winning 6 of their last 7 against India, New Zealand, South Africa. It's pretty extraordinary. And their best home summer for 18 years. Unbelievable, really.
I reckon we get the checkbook out at New Zealand cricket, get old Baz back.
Hey, I watched the Ben Stokes documentary. I'm not sure if it's Netflix or Amazon Prime. I've got both. I'm not showing off.
Yeah.
But it was on one of them. It's actually well worth a watch.
Oh, okay.
So
I'll have a
if you
gander.
subscribe to either of those and you can find it, dig it out and give it a watch. There's quite a bit of stuff from Christchurch, and some of it's very poignant. But I do get a better sense of, I guess, what drives him. He has got an incredible internal will to win games of cricket, even when he's feeling like shit. And actually, some of the most poignant material in the documentary is an interview he does with the director Sam Mendes, formerly Mrs. Kate Winslet, I believe, who is interviewing him, and he's just had a mental breakdown, and he's just vacant, and it's really bizarre watching it, but it all kind of fits together in the end, and you realise why they've spent so long on this interview, which is not going well. Yeah, well worth it.
Yeah, I'll have a gander. In other cricketing news, this is fantastic. Sri Lanka wins the Asia Cup, Paul Ford. Bloody good on them, mate. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about that. I've been sort of monitoring the crowd violence, which we can get to later on. But, I guess it's good news for Sri Lanka. Always good to be... they love to be dancing in the street or protesting in the streets. They've been in Colombo. There's been a lot going on, railing against corruption and all sorts of things. And now they're back out in the streets, not worrying about hyperinflation and power blackouts and food shortages, but the fact that they've beaten India and Pakistan and Afghanistan at cricket. Good on them.
Guess who the coach is?
Of Sri Lanka?
He needed a bit of redemption. He's the guy Baz booted out of his job unceremoniously.
All right, okay.
Chris Silverwood. Good on him.
Yeah. Hey, now, cricket poems by Jason Hoyte and friends. And on the boundary, I actually had a cricket poem today too, and which I didn't bloody bring in with me. But this one is a beauty. Thanks for nominating it, Paul.
You're welcome.
Cricket's cacophony. Our urban soliloquy remains oblivious to the symbiotic romances living within night. Masses are blinded by the artificial glaring streetlights shroud these punctured skies in a hazed purple afterglow of smog. Herds of cars migrate deeper into darkness through their rumble distorts that sacred stillness. Now sleep is a myth, silence an exhausted metaphor. Yet somewhere beneath silhouetted trees, a midnight air takes me like a seasoned, vibrant lover. That's by Billy Marie.
Yeah.
July 31st, 2011, fellas.
Have we got the right cricket there?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it might be about insects, but it's okay.
That fits into the the cricket realm there. But no.
I thought you read it beautifully.
It was a beautiful reading.
Thank you. Hey, but right now it's time for the ever popular Paul Ford's News or Ruse.
Yeah, it is. Dylan Cleaver, that's weird. Dylan Cleaver marooned at the top of the heap on 8, and then a bit of a quiet patch, a bit like Kane Williamson and Cairns. Hoyte J off the mark last week, great to see, on 2, and I'm accidentally on 4. Number 1, as King Charles III was proclaimed the new king, Prince William has become the heir apparent and has had some interesting additions to his inheritance. King Charles' assets that are reportedly worth £1 billion will now also be in William's name, including London's iconic cricket ground, the Oval. This is because William is the new official owner of the Duchy of Cornwallis, a private estate established by King Edward III in 1337 to provide independence and income to his son. Since then, it has been given to the heir of the king or queen. Surrey County Cricket Club became the sole leaseholder of the Oval ground in 1874. Number 2. Newsflash, an Australian has been caught cheating at cricket. Australian batter Nick Maddison's caused a stir in the county championship after his bat has been found to be too big. Playing for Durham against Derbyshire, umpire Hassan Adnan halted play. Amazing eyes, these umpires. Halted play to check the size of the batsman's bat. Repeated attempts to get the bat through a specific measurement gauge failed, and it was taken away by the match referee. Bats are to be no deeper than 6.8 centimetres, no wider than 11 centimetres, and an edge height no taller than 4.1 centimetres. The dirty, filthy, mustachioed Australian was forced to use another bat, which did fit through the gauge for the remainder of the innings. He was out not long after for 8 off 30 balls. Number 3, Jesus turned water into wine and possibly loved the game of cricket in his spare time. Experts have claimed Jesus was the first person to ever play cricket, and he used his abilities to walk on water and field the ball. Historians Tom Holland, Dominic Sandbrook and John Houghton from the amazing Ruthlessness History podcast are the ones who put forward the theory that the Son of God was playing cricket 3,000 years before the game is said to have been invented. An 8th century manuscript described the childhood of Jesus and said people were throwing balls and hitting them, and Jesus chased the ball and could run into the sea to field it. Boys would scream and say, "Watch that child Jesus, what he does over the waves of the sea." They would gather there, and watching him, they would be amazed. So there we go.
Okay. I read that Nick Maddison story. His bat, with the spine was too high on it, wasn't it? So it wasn't too wide. It was too
long,
deep, or whatever the word is. I think it's a pretty obvious one, actually. When Jesus fielded that ball, it can't have been 3,000 years before cricket was invented, because we're nowhere near the year 3,000 yet. So I'm going for that.
Well, yes, I was going to go for that as well, but can we both go for it? I can't deliberately choose.
You can, and I'll give you both 2 points. Yes, you can.
Thank you.
I was trying to give Jason a really easy one because I couldn't remember if he was going first or not, but then it was Dylan, so that massively backfired. All good. Yeah, well played. Cleaver 10, Hoyte 4.
Well, I piggybacked them, surely.
I am rocketing up. I've been a slow burn all year, but here I come, boys. But right now it's time for Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Yes, as promised, Pakistan's victory over Afghanistan in Sharjah descended into chaos in the UAE as fans came to blows following the match. You could see Afghani supporters ripping those blue seats out of the stands and hurling them at Pakistani fans who were quite good at catching and tossed them back. People were seen ducking for cover, chairs were flying all over the stands, and there was some footage of one portly, unarmed Pakistani fan being whomped on his back multiple times with a seat. Other Afghan spectators were seen to try to pacify the situation by snatching chairs from their fellow fans and trying to calm them down. Along with attacks inside the ground, there's quite a lot of social media footage showing both sets of supporters engaging in massive brawls outside of the stadium. The Asia Cup. We love it.
Waiting! Hey, but now it's time for another new segment of the podcast. Dylan Cleaver's Obscure Players of the 90s.
Yeah, and look, I still haven't got a sting.
Yeah, we need to get you a sting.
I know Paul Ford only has to click his fingers. And
No. I don't have one for the poetry one either.
Yeah.
I'd like a bit of background music for that, just quietly. But hit
You
us,
guys need
Dylan,
to be a
hit
bit
us.
nicer to the producers.
Hit us.
Hey, well, I'm working my way from the bottom of the country to the top. Last week we featured Justin Poole, fantastic offie from Otago. Today we're stopping in Canterbury, and a guy I really rated and thought he might have done a little bit more in his career than he did, Robbie Frew.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, look, I thought he was a terrific batsman, and perhaps I'm being unkind to him. He did play 35 first-class games from 1995-96 season right through to 02-03. He lost his contract after that. He did score 3 centuries, 10 50s, but he also didn't do a lot in between those times. He ended up averaging 29 in first-class cricket, but apparently he became like a legendary Hawke Cup cricketer for Canterbury Country. He used to just score century after century for Canterbury Country. I played a little bit against him in age group cricket, and he was part of a very strong Canterbury team alongside the likes of Nathan Astle and Jeff Allett and Gary Stead and Stephen Fleming. And I thought he was the equal of those guys. So Robbie Frew.
He's also, so Nathan Astle is married to Kelly Astle, and Kelly, so that's Nathan and Kelly, and then Nathan's sister Lisa married Robbie Frew, and their son, I can't remember his name, it might be Geordie or something like that. He's a gun. He's a young sort of, I don't know.
Get him in the Black Caps now.
Cricketer.
Get him in the Black Caps now. Why not? What have we got to lose, for God's sake? Hey, now listen, we always love your correspondence and questions that you ask us. If people do want to get in touch with us, Paul, what do they do?
Bang us through an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs for the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade on Instagram or Facebook.
Great stuff.
We'll get stuck into your wordage next week.
Good on you. What's going on with the bounce at the moment, Dylan?
Well, funnily enough, I just had an essay today, part one of an essay from Justin Paul, who I featured last week.
Yes.
He's written a beautiful piece about his cricket career. The second part, which will drop later this evening when I stick the BYC podcast in as well. So Dylan Cleaver, all one word, .substack.com. Get on there, get amongst it.
Good on you, mate.
That Justin Paul piece is beautiful. I was reading it just before I popped on here, and there's a lovely quote in here. So if you like cricket, you've got to read this. This is one of the quotes. I'll try to illustrate cricket's impact on my life and whether I want to initiate you into her fervent cult with its arcane codes and protocols. It's beautifully written.
You've got until next week to enter to be a part of the ACC 11 team for the Dulux Big Bash event in November, with flights and accommodation included. Make sure you can play, like really play. We need a win after a 4-loss streak. Just text Dulux to 3236 to enter. Simple as that. Thanks to our great mates at Dulux. Hey, well, thanks for taking the time to listen to the BYC podcast. I'm assuming we'll be back same time, same place next week?
I hope so.
Yeah, good on you. See you later.